Welcome to Bridging the Bayou, where we will explore what it means to work, live, and play in the Bayou region. Join us as we take a deeper dive into the people and experiences that make our region such a special place to live and work. On each podcast, we will talk to individuals who are making our region grow and go, who are making strides in uplifting our community. This is a podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. Welcome to Bridging the Bayou, the podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. I'm your host, Chancellor Kristine Strickland, and today we are joined by our own Lafourche Parish President, Mr. Archie Chaisson. Archie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for the invite, Doc.
Oh, so glad you could be here with us today. So we are going to jump right in, get to know you a little bit better, and talk a little bit about parish government and the future of Lafourche and just all good things happening in our neighbor parish to Terrebonne here, where we sit in Schriever, Louisiana, for those of you who aren't aware, Terrebonne Parish. But we're going to start off with some personal questions, get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready? We call this the 5 and 5. 5 questions, 5 minutes-ish. Ish. And just really going to get to know you a little bit better. So let's start with, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
You know, I tell this story all the time. When I was growing up, my grandmother always told me I was going to be a politician or a priest.
Okay.
I'm the third Archie. I'm of the three of us, I was the most social one of the group. My grandfather probably second, my dad the least of all. But I knew everybody, right? I traveled around with my grandparents a lot growing up. So it was weird. We'd walk into Walmart and somebody would say, "Hey, Archie." And one of the two of us would turn around, and 75% of the time they were looking for me and not either my dad or my grandfather. So I think that's kind of where she got it from. So she was halfway right. But
yeah,
the whole priest thing was never going to work out for a variety of reasons. But I kind of stumbled into politics. It wasn't anything that I had a dream to be. And later on down the road, it just kind of happened.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe we'll dive into that a little bit later. So what's your favorite movie and why?
So favorite movie of all time is The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, good one.
Yeah, it just, I watched it as a kid again with my dad, and I just kind of fell in love with the movie. Kind of the storyline, an innocent guy goes to jail and kind of redeems himself. He escapes, which is probably not the best thing in the world, but it was a very well-written movie, great cast, and I've probably watched it 50 times in my life.
Oh, good memories with your dad, huh?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Name or tell us about something you've done in your life that you never in a million years thought that you'd have the opportunity to do.
Oh, geez. I think this, right?
Podcasting?
Well, not podcasting, that too. I mean, I've done several of these, and they're kind of fun. I think this whole elected official running a parish thing was, again, and I know we'll probably get to it later, but never something I thought I'd dream. I'd say, secondly, I've had the opportunity to meet 2 presidents in my life.
Really?
Both Trump and Biden when he was in office. And again, not something, so all really I have left is the Pope, and I get to check off my bucket list of really cool people I like to meet. But never thought, even doing this, that you'd get the opportunity to meet a president. One of them, and both of them were because of disasters, right? One because of COVID, one because of Hurricane Ida. But having the opportunity to meet those guys, and you get a little starstruck when you see them, right? And they come walking off the helicopter, you get to walk in the White House and meet them. So meeting a president was definitely not on my list in life, but something that was a really, really awesome experience.
Very cool. And I will say that I had an opportunity to spend time with the other famous Chaisson of Lafourche Parish. Chet was here, and he mentioned the same thing, getting to meet the president. And one of the things he shared was just, no matter your political affiliation, that you have an opportunity to stand there and speak to and be in the presence of the person who is running our country and is the leader of our democracy is just an overwhelming and awe-inspiring event. So it sounds like you would agree with that.
Yeah, going to the White House was something weird, right? Because again, you see, how many times have we gone to D.C. together, right?
Right.
And you see the building from the outside. You may get to do one of the little tours, and you get to see the hallways for Christmas or something like that. But to go into the White House itself and be between me and you of the president and the vice president,
wow.
It was during Operation Warp Speed. So when the vaccine first came out, so it was President Trump, Vice President Pence, General Milley, who was in charge of Operation Warp Speed and the logistics of getting all these vaccines out. The Surgeon General, the guy who developed the RNA behind the vaccine was there, kind of walking us through the science. So it was, I mean, it was a very random experience, but a very cool day to be able to be in the same room as all those guys for 6 hours. And then, of course, when President Biden came down after Hurricane Ida, landed at Chet's Airport in Galliano, and you see Marine One land, you see the Marine get out and open the door, and all the stuff you see on TV, and it's 30 feet from you. But to sit in a room for 45 minutes with the president and talk about issues in your community, what's happened to your residents, what do we need to get it fixed, is one very powerful, because the man who can make it all happen is sitting right there across from you.
Right.
So it was a really cool experience.
So few people get to have an experience like that. I recently read that most legislators at the federal level only get to meet the president, I guess, when they have legislation passed. I think they told us that on a House of Representatives tour at one point. And so to have met 2 sitting presidents in the course of your life and career, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I was joking when President Biden came down after Hurricane Ida, I was joking with Charlotte Randolph, because Obama came down there and they all spilled. There's a famous picture of Miss Randolph with him on the beach with the tar ball. And I said, what is it with these Democrats and natural disasters? Like, we both get them. But again, regardless of your political affiliation, right? Again, getting to meet those 2 individuals and having time with them to talk about what's going on in your community, the plight of your people, either during a global pandemic or after a Category 4 hurricane whips your butt. It's a really, really awesome thing.
Fantastic. So you can have dinner with anyone in the world. Who is it?
Ronald Reagan.
Okay, tell us why.
From a philosophical standpoint and just from a great man perspective, he was probably one of the greatest human beings to ever walk the face of the planet. And just the policies he put in place when he was in the White House, and just be able to pick his brain about what it was like dealing with the Soviets and going through that, even talking a little bit Iran-Contra and what that was really like, with Ollie North, and what really happened behind the scenes there. But I just think he'd be a fascinating individual to sit down and talk to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I feel like his legacy has come up more, probably, I think, in the past 5 or 10 years, where individuals, whether it's in the federal government or presidents, who put forward platforms, right, that can be traced back to his original ideas that he had about the way government should work. So.
I'd also really want to know how fast his heart was beating when he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall," right? Because he had to be nervous. Because the just speechwriters were like really evident about getting that in there. And he knew what kind of storm he was going to open up when he said it,
right.
And just what the thought process was in that moment.
Very nice. Well, cool. All right, last of the 5 and 5. Favorite thing to cook?
I spend a lot of time cooking.
Do you?
I do. I have a little outdoor kitchen set up at the house,
okay.
in my shop. So I would have to say like a pork roti, right, over some rice.
Gotcha.
With some green beans. Probably
right.
the best meal ever. If I was ever on death row and they asked me what I wanted to eat for the last meal, it would definitely be that.
All right, so tell me a little bit about that. You're talking to look, I've lived down here 30 years,
right?
but I am not. I guess I'm a non-Cajun Ohioan who
right.
I know what pork is.
Right.
What's the second part of
pork
that?
roti. It's kind of a smothered pork. You big black iron pot. You brown your pork meat, pull it out, dump your Trinity in there. Smother it all down with some water over 5 or 6 hours, and when you pull it out, it's got a nice gravy, really tender meat. Dump it over some rice.
Okay, that sounds fantastic.
We'll have you and Adam over for dinner.
Please do that. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it now. If you'd like, I can even make some homemade mashed potatoes. That's my specialty.
There we go.
So, all right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Lafourche Parish.
Yep.
Let's start off with very basically, how's it going? How are things in Lafourche Parish?
Things are really good. We're still doing a lot of Hurricane Ida recovery, unfortunately. And I tell people all the time, I was the guy who would watch the news after Katrina, and they'd be like 5-7 years out. And they're like, the city's still torn up, and we're still asking FEMA for money, and we're doing all this. And I'm like, guys, it can't be that difficult, right? There's no way it takes you that long to put something like New Orleans back together. We hear on the news you get billions and billions of dollars, right? Well, here I am staring at the 4-year anniversary of Hurricane Ida, and we're still putting stuff back together, right? We still have buildings that are in disrepair, right? Judges are still moving around because we're trying to fix the courthouse. We have, employees still working off of folding tables because, we need furniture and buildings to be finished before we put them back and where their office used to be. So that sort of the component has been really frustrating as you tried to fight that process and fight that battle. FEMA's been in the news a lot the last few weeks, right? Between President Trump's comments and now DHS Secretary Noem's comments about what do we do with that agency. And we can have longer podcast about that if you ever wanted to.
We'll bring you back. We'll
come back and talk about that depending on what happens. But overall, the community has rebounded, right? A lot of people are still working through their own restoration issues, right? Insurance issues, and had to sue their own insurance company, things like that. And I like to tell people on the street when we run into those is, look, we're no different than you guys, right? We're still suing our own insurance company from a parish level. We're still rebuilding our buildings. So we know there's a lot of work to do. But overall, the parish is doing really well economically. You mentioned Chet, right? Chet and the Port Commission down there, great things happening. And Fouchon is really our economic driver, right? If it wasn't for that place, I don't know what we'd look like, right? We'd probably look like Richland Parish waiting on a meta, super data center, right? And nothing against Richland, right? There's just North Louisiana is North Louisiana. I think we'd look something like that. But they're doing some great things. The vessels are starting to move again. Again, I think some of the policies we're going to see from a second Trump presidency is going to be drill, baby, drill, which is going to do well for you guys here with kids enrolling in programs.
Absolutely.
And putting the workforce back to work where we need it to be. We have a lot of great, John Deere's doing an expansion in Thibodaux right now in their facility. We just had a huge expansion of Cairo Foods, Performance Food Group Cairo and Bayou Blue. I did somewhere around a $50 million expansion of their facility. So we've seen businesses that have been here for years starting to expand, which is a good thing. We found this neat, economic development tool that we can use with our industrial development board and bringing other partners in, something that we've historically never done in Lafourche. And I'd like to say we've always had an economic development department. For years we've had one, right? Ms. Randolph had one when she was there the first time. But we always got so busy chasing grant dollars from that, we forgot about the businesses. We didn't go to people and say, hey, how you doing, right? And there was a local business owner, I'm not going to mention his name, he might get mad at me, but when I went to see him the first time, he's like, man, the only time politicians come is when they need a check. So I've made it a point every year I call him and I say, hey, I need 20 minutes. The first year I went back and he's like, what do you need? I went, nothing, I'm just coming to check on you. You said the only reson we came is to get a check. Well, how we doing, right? And we've kept that up, and we've done that with businesses to make sure that they have what they need to grow, to be resilient, to come back and to stay here. So we're doing pretty well. We could always be better, right? We could always have a nuclear power plant and have more money, right? But we're not. We're slowly becoming that bedroom community where people can work in Terrebonne, people can work in Lafourche, but they can work in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, on the river. It's a quick drive, and we're becoming that place people are bringing their paychecks back to, and becoming that bedroom community, which is nice. That's
great. So a couple things off of that. One of them is when you were talking about the challenges and you're talking about the recovery and the rebuilding, and certainly you mentioned insurance, but here as one of the workforce developers, I'm sure that the shortage of workforce has also played an impact. Is that an accurate statement in terms of getting things rebuilt?
It is. We've seen a lot of migrant labor come in, right? Which is what people are able to grab sometimes, especially in those construction crews, right? The skilled trades are something that we're seeing a kind of a resurgence in. We've gotten past, I know you've talked about this before, where everybody has to go to college. Well, no, not everybody has to go to college, right? There are other avenues, and in a day where we're paying our plumbers more than our lawyers, it shows that those skills trades are really needed. But everybody you talk to, it's all about workforce, right? We have, as we sit here today on February 10th, we have probably 20 open positions in parish government that we can't fill, right? Everything from an equipment operator to an HVAC technician, right? It's finding people who, one, want to work, and two, that are either coming in with a skilled trade or that are trainable and that want to actually learn. So yeah, I think it's going to be a problem as we look toward, how do we continue to expand the parish, right? And what industries we're trying to recruit here. We went with a business who we're trying to bring in from another parish. At some point when his business fully kicks off, he's going to need 250 people per shift at 4 shifts a day. It's 1,000 people coming through Lafourche Parish, right?
Amazing. I
don't know that we have 1,000 people right now that we could fill that with, right? So where do we go find them? And it's going to be, again, those partnerships that I think help us get there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. One of the things that we've seen is the construction trades as a boom in that. And we are very, very focused. You mentioned some of those traditional trades that we do a lot of training in: HVAC, welding, electrical. All really critical. I'll take a minute here just to say, with jobs open in Lafourche Parish, if you're looking for a position, please feel free to maybe not call the parish president, but visit the website. Let's put a quick plug in. What's your website address if they wanted to go look at some of these jobs?
Yeah, it's www.lafourchegov.org.
Easy enough, lafourchegov.org. But also want to take a moment just to say thank you. You all have been such fantastic partners at our Thibodaux campus that we have over there on Tiger Drive, where we do the vast majority of our technical training right now. And so I just want to take a moment to say thank you, and thank you to the parish, parish officials, just for that support. And we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the expansion that we're hoping to see there, specifically in the construction trades.
Yeah.
And I think there's some really good things happening. But again, kind of coming off of some of the opportunities, while you were talking and you were mentioning some of the businesses that reside and call Lafourche home, there are some really significant international players. You mentioned John Deere. We have Bollinger Shipyards. We have Fouchon, where you have a number of international companies who are really housed and access the Gulf right from that location. And I don't think sometimes people realize the heavy hitters, the powerhouse businesses we have in Lafourche Parish. And I don't know if you want to take a moment to kind of highlight that for us.
Yeah, and when you look at us, I mean, we're very linear, right? I mean, Lafourche is a little over 100 miles long from tip to bottom. We're 53 or 56 miles wide from Bayou Bleu to Des Allemands, and it kind of runs the gambit. We have some manufacturing and people like John Deere up in Thibodaux that send cane harvesters all over the world. The expansion they're doing is on a new generation of cotton harvesters, right? That was being made overseas. So we're bringing jobs not only back to the USA, but right here in Thibodaux, right? But Thibodaux is fastly becoming our retail restaurant hub, right? If you drive North Canal Boulevard right now, and I know you do it a lot, right? It's almost like driving down Martin Luther King or veterans, right? There's stuff popping up everywhere. There's new construction happening, as we speak along that stretch as well, whether it's medical professional offices or a new school that's going up on the north end of town. So then you get to the central part of the parish, right, which is a lot of continued manufacturing, some light manufacturing. Probably, I guess it's been there for 7 or 10 years now. The Genesis oil hub that you see through the cane field in the back, right, is bringing shale oil by train from the Dakotas. And pumping it to the refineries, right? So it's not just what we manufacture. I mean, it's what we manufacture here, but where all that stuff goes, right? We are the place that feeds and fuels America. Between the port and you take things like Genesis and the central part of the parish that's shipping to the refineries on the river, and then that fuel and those products go all over the world to make all kind of different things, right? Sugarcane industry continues to be huge for us, right? We ship sugar all over the world with, Raison Raw sugars and even Lafourche sugars right there in Thibodaux. About a $1.2 billion impact to the state's economy every year, coming out of the acreage that we have in Lafourche. And then of course you get down to South Lafourche, and it's seafood and oil and gas is king, right? Yeah. But again, the things Chet and those guys are doing down there, looking forward toward the advent of whatever offshore wind brings, and whether or not we continue to see the lease sales with the new administration, but continued promise there, right? Again, not only to put people back to work, put vessels back to work. In the capacity that they can help in that industry, but it's a revitalization opportunity for South Lafourche, right? When you look at things like insurance and just the cost to do things, South Lafourche is the community that hits the hardest, right? And people are migrating north as little Johnny grew up and went to college or came to Fletcher and moves on to a different, maybe a plant operator at Dow on the river, right? He's probably not driving back to Golden Meadow at night to do that, right? Grandma and grandpa or mom and dad might still live down there, but the generational gap is growing. Yeah. There was a meme, and I'll give the Ross Jeanball a plug for his memes. He went through a series of these pictures of Trump signing executive orders, and it was all kind of weird, regional stuff on it. And one was, again, as an Ohioan, you're not going to understand what I'm saying, but there's this little thing in South Lafourche called the Shanachawin. It was a big old oak tree. In the heyday, it's where every politician went if you wanted to get elected in South Lafourche, right? It was a set of brothers. They hold they have the supper clubs and the lunch clubs and the coffee clubs all day. And I think in this particular tree, there's still a sign that says Cam Bovon for district attorney in it from when Cam ran years and years and years ago. But it was a meme by Ross, and it said, President Trump now orders that the Shanachawin is now the parish seat of Lafourche Parish, and Parish President Archie Chaisson has to hold all official business down at that one particular place, right? So it's still a prevalent place for people to go. The two brothers are now no longer with us, but I think next week I'm going to go down with a little folding table and my little nameplate, and we're gonna have a meeting down there or something to make Ross a little bit more famous. But again, that's the power that community once had. Right. And while it still has a huge amount of power and influence, when you look at things like Port Fouchon, the population is starting to shift, right? So how do we put things back down there? So again, trying to find companies that fit into what Chet and those guys are doing, that want a protection of a levee system, but want to be close to the water, want to be close to the port, and how do we put that community back together? And that's kind of where I think you're going to see our focus shift for the next couple of years that we're still around.
Okay. So first question, if I want to go see this tree.
I'll drop you a pin.
Okay, please do. I really want to take a stop and see this. But you mentioned about the migration. And of course, I'm up in Thibodaux, and we see new homes, a lot of new subdivisions coming up, lots of restaurants, very much what you're talking about in terms of that boutique bedroom community. Are you seeing that it's more sort of in migration within the parish where people are just moving north, or is it people moving in from outside the parish into, or is it a combination? Like, what is driving this huge, what seems to be pretty huge expansion right now in Thibodaux?
I think it's a 60-40 split. I think a lot of it is inward migration. Again, I think it's a lot of people who are, first-time home buyers that, again, may have grown up in South Lafourche, right? But because of insurance, because of job, because of whatever, it may be the spouse that wants to be closer to the things that are in Thibodaux, right? There's a lot more things in Thibodaux than there are in Golden Meta. So I think part of that is that. After Ida, we saw a huge swing again north. We saw it after Gustav and Ike as well, right? As the cost of rebuilding went up, cost of insurance goes up constantly, right? You see that migration north. And I think it's people who are locating here. I think as, people come in to work at, Nichols Fletcher, the hospital or healthcare network, as our school system recruits teachers from other places to come here, I think you're seeing that inward migration as well. So I think it's a little bit of a combination of both, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud that we've built a community over the years that people want to live and work and play here, right? That's kind of been the tagline that we've used. But it's good to see the shift, right? That people are growing up and they have the ability to move anywhere, but they're staying here. They're buying their first home here. They want to be close to family and friends. I think it was Dr. Don Davis, who was at LSU forever and was at Nichols for a while. He used to do this big Cajun seminar, right, and talk all about Louisiana. And it was the average Cajun doesn't move more than 25 miles from where they grew up, right? I went 2. So I mean, I'm part of that track record. But a lot of people don't because of the generational shifts. They want to be close to mom and dad. They want to be close to mama and papa. And a lot of us don't leave, right? Part of it's just because of love of community. And again, I'm proud that people, while they have the ability to leave, are not, and they're staying here.
Yeah. Let's talk a minute about sort of saving the culture of South Lafourche, right? I too have spoken to a lot of individuals who simply can't afford. Maybe. I met with someone the other day and they said, my children, I'd love for them to stay down here, but realistically speaking, in terms of insurance and all of the things, they are moving north. And so are you thinking about ways to preserve that South Lafourche culture? What does that look like? How do you even begin to wrap your arms around doing that work?
That's the $1 million question.
Okay.
And I've had that conversation with lots of people, right? Several business owners have asked me that, like, how do we revitalize South Lafourche? And I don't know. I think it goes back to putting together a whole hell of a lot of partnerships, right? Starting with our insurance commissioner, who's going to help us drive down insurance rates, all the way down to, again, how do we talk about workforce? How do we talk about bringing businesses here that need to locate here, that may be coming from other places, that develop a new widget that that works in offshore wind, works in the oil and gas industry with something new. Again, I think as the oil industry goes, so will South Lafourche, right? If we see that continue to prime up, I think we get more people to start to look back at moving there or relocating there. Again, it's going to be a money factor for a lot of people. There's some real estate down there, right? There's still places to develop subdivisions on some big acreage. There's a lot of pasture land still down there. A lot of it's cattle farmers these days, right, that have just bought up some old family property because, again, grandma and grandpa might have passed away. The kids really didn't want to have anything to do with it because they may or may not be still around here. So we've seen large tracts of land get swallowed up and still doing agricultural stuff. But it's gonna be tough to put that region back together. And if I had the answer, I'd have done it already. But I don't. It's gonna take a whole lot of us thinking for a lot of years. Hopefully, not too many years. But how do we put it back together?
So who needs to be at the table to help you? If it's going to take a village, right? Who makes up that village?
You want names or you want to ask? Because if you're volunteering, no,
sign me up, Coach.
Right? It's going to take some community members. It's going to take business owners. It's going to take people who have a little bit of foresight that can see where we're going to head economy wise. And I think as we get into the next probably 8-10 months and we see what's going to happen with the Trump administration and what drill baby drill looks like, what alternative energy is going to look like, right, with offshore wind. There's a huge potential for us to grow that if offshore wind continues to take off, right? Because there are going to be people who are going to want to locate there because Fouchon is going to be the hub for that. When Chet and I first started kind of diving in this offshore wind thing, the first conference we went to was in Atlantic City. It was the IPF forum where it was the first year that they were really talking about having leases in the Gulf of Mexico. Chet and I had sat on the BOEM task force for offshore wind that Governor Edwards helped set up. And we were like, okay, let's go see what this is all about. And the first meeting we walked into was, it was supposed to be about Gulf wind. And they had 50 or 60 chairs set up in the room. And by the time it started, they had 200 people in the room probably, right? Because everybody was really focused on what that was going to look like. A lot of it was Louisiana and Mississippi-based companies who saw the potential to put their boats back to work, to put their people back to work, to have their widget used or whatever on a wind platform. And it's grown since then. There's a big Louisiana delegation that went to Germany this year to look at how they were doing it in Hamburg and the potential of what that looked like here in the supply chain and all the stuff that comes with a wind turbine. And you may think they're ugly. You may think they're going to fall apart when a hurricane comes, and that's great. And they might, right? But if we get 15 or 20 years of putting our people back to work, to me, it's worth it.
Right.
So we've kind of coined Lafourche as the gateway to Gulf wind. Because the lift boats that are down there that went to Block Island already and put these things up, guess where they came from? They came from Cutoff and Galliano, right? The big vessels that Schwess and the Bollingers and the Candies are looking at, guess where they're housed? Between the Zalmans and Fouchon. So we're gonna be a huge hub for that. And if it takes off, I think that's check one of the 3 that we need to get that community back up and running.
Awesome. So talking about another great business partner, Fletcher's, and I know an important component to Lafourche Parish is the hospital system. And again, pretty expansive growth there. And kudos to them on really having that vision in terms of the wellness center and the sports park and then just the medical care. What kind of impact does having a healthcare system like that have on Lafourche?
Yeah, I mean, just from the employee perspective, it's huge, right? Just from when you look at payroll coming back into the community, and only a lot of the people who work at Thibodaux Regional, work at Oshner St. Anne, work at Lady of the Sea, live here. And if they do drift off, they may be coming to home. They may be going to St. Charles, but a lot of them are local nurses, local people who came through cardiopulmonary, pulmonology, the nursing programs. Little known fact, I started out in cardiopulmonary when I was in college.
Really?
Yeah, I did my first round of clinicals, had to intubate a kid, didn't really work well for me.
Oh.
So I kind of pulled back and went the business route. But it's a huge network, and when you look at just the growth of Thibodaux Regional and the Wellness Center, the new Cancer Center, the second phase of the Wellness Center with all the courts in the back, and what that's done for our community and giving people a place to have football and soccer and things that they wouldn't normally have access to.
Yeah, build community.
Build a community, right? And again, kind of when you talk about why that section of Thibodaux blows up, a lot of it I think has to do with that, right? Huge gym facility, their kids can play football, soccer, whatever. They can swim, they can do all this fun stuff. It's a quick 5-minute drive around town from wherever you are most days. Great way to help build that community. You look at what Oshner St. Anne has done with their expansions. Great hospital for a regional level to bring people into. A lot of people have babies there, right? I think if you talk to Sherry, that's probably their number one deal, along with unfortunately the ER visits that come across. And then looking at the rebuild of Lady of the Sea, right? You talk about a great little campus down there. Just from the temporary hospital and what they've been able to do, and now watching the new hospital come up, I think you're gonna see some growth potential around that place too. A little bit more landlocked where they are, right? But without that hospital, coming in from offshore with an injury, having a heart attack in Golden Meadow and trying to get to St. Anne or Thibodaux, probably not the best avenue for you, right? So from a life-saving perspective, they're probably the number one that we have, especially in that South Lafourche community. But yeah, I think from not only a healthcare aspect and keeping people healthy, giving them access to healthcare, and just the way they rally around their 3 different communities. Yeah. Again, as much as I like to say we're one Lafourche, very regionalized. to a certain extent. But having that regionalization is still a huge part of why we are who we are.
Absolutely. And great partners of ours, and I think you make such a wonderful point in that they really do serve different parts of the community with different needs. And being able to still access that level of health care without having to travel, say, to New Orleans. And I know, sometimes you have to for specialists, but having that hospital and that physician right there next to your home is critical for the things that we talked about, right? For making sure that communities can not only survive incidents, but also thrive in the future.
I learned a long time ago that I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, right? You got to surround yourself with those people. And that's why we talk so much about partnerships. And I know we're going to talk about a little about what you're doing in Thibodaux, but one of the reasons why we use some of the same money we're going to use to help you guys in Thibodaux, we're going to build a new clinic for Lady of the Sea in La Rose. Having that access to primary care is huge for that community and huge for any community, right? And they lost their primary clinic because of the hurricane, and they were having a hard time figuring out how they were going to rebuild it. Well, guess what? If you want people to continue to live there, if you want people to continue to be healthy, which includes a lot of our employees who live and work down there, why wouldn't we partner with them and help them build a clinic? So that's we're same week we got the award letter for the Thibodaux campus, we got the one for that clinic down there. So we're kicking off the design on that one too.
Good news.
Yep.
Good news all around. Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What are we doing in Thibodaux?
So look,
it's a pop quiz. Let's see.
Pop quiz, right? Let's see how much I can remember about it. No, it's again, because of the hurricane, we had a flood of federal money come in, right? Mm-hmm. Again, from FEMA doing all of our projects. A ton of community development block grant dollars that always come from HUD after, and how do we rebuild our community? So one of the things we figured out was, again, looking at how do we continue to grow, how do we continue to expand. Workforce is going to be a huge part of that, right? So looking at that Thibodaux campus and ways we can partner with you guys, we're going to give you, I don't know, 14, 17 million, something like that.
It's a huge chunk of change.
It's a nice number. It's a nice number.
I think I fell off the chair when I saw the award letter.
Yeah. And look, it does a couple of things, right? It puts some continued growth in a low to moderate income community, right, which is one of HUD and CDBG's main missions. But it, again, allows us to put people in a position that they can continue to grow in life. One of the other projects we're doing with that money as well, I'm going to diverge a little bit and go down this rabbit hole, is we're going to have, on veterans, which you can almost see from the Thibodaux campus, we're going to build a new Head Start Community Center on that side. It'll mirror kind of what we're doing in the Raceland community with the Reverend Wallace Center. So Reverend Wallace was the first community action director for Lafourche Parish way back in the, I don't want to say 80s. It might have been before that. But anyway, Reverend Wallace was a great leader of that community in the central part of the parish, was a pastor, was a faith leader. And one of his favorite quotes was, if you can feed a man and fish with a fish and feed him once, or you can teach a man to fish and feed him forever, right? And it's something that we've carried on in a lot of these projects, is that if we can teach you to drive a truck, if we can teach you to be a plumber, if we can teach you to be a phlebotomist, we can teach you to be an oil field tech, we can feed you forever, right? We can make you a great member of our community. You can buy that first home. You can continue to live here. You can continue to grow. And it's one thing we've tried to do. Ms. Randolph had that mission back in the day when we built the first Reverend Wallace Center. The mission will be carried on through Councilman Jerry Jones, who was the brainchild behind this last one, and is named after his brother Scuffy Jones. Will be named after him, who's an Army veteran and did a lot of great things in the community as well. So that'll be a great place that we can work with the youth and then hopefully ship them a block away to you guys and put them into the workforce.
I love it. I love it. And, it's those investments, I think, can't be understated. For so many reasons, whether it's an investment in Head Start or an investment in higher education. One of the things that we know without a doubt is that you see improved community outcomes. So, higher education, just getting some type of higher education is equated to better, healthy living, long-term lifespans, education, community volunteerism is equated to at higher levels with people who go into higher education. And so all of those things, those investments building us up, actually, again, they go to build the entire community up, because you wind up with a healthier, more involved, more engaged community at the end of the day, which I think is something we all really want to see happen. And, at the Thibodaux campus, I think I'm so excited because where we sometimes struggle in providing that education oftentimes is in a lack of space. So we have a couple of programs right now because of just limited numbers in our space, in our booth, our welding booths, those types of things. We have wait lists. And so we know we have business and industry partners who really need that workforce. We have individuals who are sitting on a wait list who are interested in getting the training and education so that they can improve their lives. And now we're going to be able to meld those two by increasing our physical space, which hopefully will enable us to, recruit new faculty members in and do all the things you're talking about so that not only are we impacting the workforce in terms of economic development, but we're impacting the economic development by hiring people and really kind of giving back to our community. So I'm really excited about it.
I think it's going to be a really cool expansion to see it happen. And then just like we see with, the parish runs our own Head Start program, right? So we see the little kiddos, all the way up. Jared and the school board have been great partners over the years as well. And then to see them come through and then get a job, go weld on we talked about international stuff, right? Go weld on a Coast Guard cutter at Bollinger that's going to end up in Madrid or somewhere in the Arabian. Came out of Lockport, Louisiana, right? Yeah. It's kind of cool.
And most people don't realize too, at Fletcher, a certificate program right now, the average salary coming out of most of our programs at the certificate level, so that's less than 2 years, is $50,000 average. So there are so many great jobs out there that will enable you to stay in the region, stay in the parish, right? Stay close to home. You're talking about how we love to stay close to where we grew up. You can do all of that.
It's a life changer for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So we've talked quite a bit about expansion and, so many good things happening. I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure that takes to make those things happen. Now, I'm not going to lie. I've seen some stuff on Facebook with bridges, and I don't know that I follow those. Right. But I also know from some time living in other communities that sometimes that expansion and that fast growth puts a strain on infrastructure. And I'm just wondering, are we seeing any of that across the parish? And what's the solutions there?
A lot of the strain that we see is on our drainage system. So you have, especially when we look at, kind of Highway 90 going north, right, west side of Thibodaux, where it's all kind of booming. You had subdivisions that were built, in the early 70s, early 80s, where people live forever. Well, as grandma, grandpa start to leave us, kids and grandkids get that property and they go, hey, look, real estate market's going to boom. Let's build a subdivision. So we've seen more concrete, more streets. So it's put a tax on our drainage system. For years we never thought that we'd see that sort of growth, so we just kind of left it the way it was. So we're starting to think outside the box. Again, Dylan Baroni, who's our public works director, has kind of had the foresight to look 25 years ahead. So when we're rebuilding some of this stuff, whether it be post Hurricane Ida or just stuff we build from regular tax dollars, we're starting to think about how do we build it better and bigger and move water a little bit faster. We're thinking about paving roads a little bit different and the frequency in which we pave them, so we don't see as many problems with them. The bridge joke down the bayou, right? You're going to catch one of them at one point when you're going. But again, that infrastructure down there is probably useful life. A lot of that stuff is older pontoon type bridges that were not meant for heavy truck traffic, that were not meant for all the traffic that we see go up and down the bayou. Again, partnerships, the new Airport Connector Road and Bridge that's being built from Highway 3235 to Chet's Airport. Great partnership between the port, the parish, the state, and the federal government, right? It's a $35 million lift span bridge. Wow. That'll connect that section of road. That'll open up some opportunities for Chet. Will make it safer for people trying to get to the airport that's flying offshore to go to an oil and gas facility, or flying in from Houston to jump to go look at a rig from an engineering perspective or something like that. So those sorts of things are the way we've tried to tackle it. We've tried to factor in some quality of life issues as well, right? How do we look at recreation spaces and building walking tracks and ball fields? Again, not only keep people here, but it draws the economy in, right? You build a nice little sports park. Guess what happens, right? You start having tournaments. People are coming in from other places, right? I get to travel with my girls as we play basketball all over the state, right? We drive to Mandeville or some of these other places, and we spend money there, right? We're spending the night. We're eating at the restaurants. Same thing happens when that team comes to Lockport to play at the community center, or comes to the Civic Center in Thibodaux and plays there. They're staying at those hotels. They're eating at those restaurants. So it's a good good mix for us.
Absolutely. So let's tackle the elephant in the room. There's some major roadway repairs coming, I think, to Canal pretty soon. Any comments? Or you can also say no comment.
Yeah, no, look, I feel bad for whoever the mayor of the city of Thibodaux is going to be when that happens, because he's going to get more flack from it than I will. But look, Audubon Avenue through campus is going to be get overlaid here very shortly.
Yeah.
We're doing some downtown sidewalks with the city of Thibodaux through the MPO to put in some new ADA compliant sidewalks. There's going to be there's a ton of construction happening right now. You look at just LA1 going to the port, right? We're building that last 8.5 mile segment. It's some $500 million worth of construction happening down there. And again, that all has a trickle down economic effect, right? That truck driver is going to stop and buy gas. He's going to stop and eat lunch. He may need a new hard hat. So he's going to stop at Melico Sisters and Cut Off and buy a hard hat from their hardware store, right? It could be the tow truck that towed the broken down truck that was stuck on LA1 this morning, hauling a piling down there because his brakes locked up, right? It could be a fascinating amount of things, and all those things play into us.
Okay. Well, can I ask, because just curious minds want to know, why are we doing the bridge? It seems like an okay bridge to me, but then I'm not a bridge engineer.
Yeah,
but
I think if you ever got in a boat and you looked underneath it, you would probably not drive over it again.
Got it.
Not to say that it's not safe, right? DOT has inspected it's safe to drive on, but it's just an aging. it's an old timber pile bridge. The decking's got some issues that have been patched several times over the years, so it's time. It's reached its useful life.
Got it.
Kind of similar to the one that's over there by you on Percy Brown.
Yep.
That's going to come out hopefully in the next 6 or 8 months as well.
Oh, I didn't
Same
know that.
thing, old timber pile bridge that's reached its useful life and just needs to be replaced.
Okay.
So again, the new infrastructure, right? It's going to be great once it's there.
Yeah.
But it's going to cause us some headaches because it's all going to have to come out at one time. Although we've had a lot of conversations with. I've talked to the mayor about this. We've talked to the legislators about this. We watched the Freshwater District build a railroad bridge in 3 days.
Wow.
Right over by Lafourche when the new pump station coming in Donaldsonville. So I don't see why we can't build a small bridge in the same. It's not going to take 6 or 8 months, right? There's got to be a construction company who can come in with the right people and the right equipment that over the course of a very short period of time can put that thing back together.
Yeah, and can get it done.
Yeah.
Okay, so folks out there watching and listening, patience. It's a virtue.
That's right.
It is also what's needed to make good progress.
Or hopefully it happens in 2 years and 46 weeks and I'm just not around anymore, right?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Okay, inquiring minds want to know, how do you feel about roundabouts?
Yeah, I love them.
Do you?
I absolutely do. We have a couple people in the office that hate them and they call them Archie circles. But I absolutely love. They make traffic.
I love that so much.
Traffic so much easier. If I could get people to realize it's a yield sign and not a stop sign.
Yeah.
And the only reason you stop is if there's somebody coming.
Yeah.
We'd be a whole lot better.
Yeah.
But I love them. I love the new one in Thibodaux. I love the one that was on Audubon that we did on Nichols' campus a few years ago. I think it makes traffic so much easier.
Yeah. So can I pick on you for just a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I said
don't like
I think that no, I love them, but I think the reason why people are stopping is because there's 17 signs to read before you get.
There is. Yeah.
Just follow the arrows.
Just follow the arrows. Follow the arrows.
We talked about, and you didn't use these words, right? But the tourism, and I had the opportunity to serve on the Tourism Commission in Lafourche. And I even was really unaware of how much tourism comes into the parish. I think we just had the All-Stars, the skating competition, and there is a lot of really good things happening. What should people in the parish know about the importance of the tourism industry? I mean, I think about in South Lafourche, the fishing tours and just people who come in and that strong French Canadian connection, right? We've talked about some of that as well. But what do the people in the parish need to know?
I don't think people realize how many other people actually come through us.
Yeah.
Right? They don't
It's
get
shocking.
the number of people that go find Mr. Arthur swamp boats or you go to Zams and Kramer and do their swamp tours or go to come here because they've seen something about the restaurant and the food trail.
Yes.
And they go hit every single restaurant that's on that thing from Thibodaux to Fouchon. I think if people realize, and look, Cody and Ian and Ms. Brenda and their staff do an awesome job, and Cody comes once a year and does the presentation for the council. And I think even for us, right, we get lost in it. I know what Cody and Ian, I think I know what Cody and Ian do, right? They do a lot more than probably what I know about. But when he puts the numbers up on the screen every year and you see the economic impact, you see the number of people that come through here, right? That either stop in their office or they get their intel from the vendors that they interact with, the number of people that come through here and where they came from, right? Yeah, a lot of it's French people, right? Canadians that come down or from France, but just the people that come through here it astounds me, and I think we get lost in it because we see it every day, right? I don't see the advent of the alligator in the bayou, right? Yeah, it's cool. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But for that guy who maybe from Australia who came here last year, right, who had never seen that before, or never been on an airboat, or never ate at Spars or the Twist or something like that, right? He's going, this is awesome, right? And guess what? He's not maybe not come back in his lifetime, but he's going to send somebody else here in a year or 2 years. So it's a huge impact for us.
It's funny you mentioned the alligators. So when we first moved down here, my daughter was going into freshman year in high school, and so you can imagine she wasn't super happy that I had picked her up and uprooted her from her friends and all of her school community and the whole deal. And the one thing that was like her thing moving down here was to see an alligator. And so every time we'd make a drive up and back when we were looking for homes or we were making the transition, she'd be like, I need to see an alligator. This is the only reason that moving down here is worthwhile, is I might do to see a live alligator. So it's things that probably if you grew up in the area or you're from the community, maybe, you see it and you go, oh, that's cool. Yeah. But for others, that's like a real novelty and something super special that's making memories for them.
We have a fleet of boats, right? So we, every now and then we'll take folks from our own office out. Our finance staff loves to come out because they see the bills for the projects, but they never get to see the projects, right? Because they're cooped up in the finance office. So every now and then we'll throw one or two of the ladies on a boat, and for even them, right? People who grew up here that probably have never seen what's on the opposite side of that levee system, right? And they get on an airboat and go look at a coastal restoration project, go look at some terraces, and then for them too, you see the otter, you see the nutria, you see the alligator. They're not, and you sometimes get lost in it, but it's a really cool place to see.
Yeah. Very nice. So we recently we had an opportunity to speak with the parish president from Terrebonne. Jason was on the podcast.
Wait, you mean I came after Jason? What's up with that?
Well, it was your schedule.
I understand. I know.
Just kidding. But I'm interested to know, we talk a lot about regionalism and the importance of that. We're sort of surrounded by some of these mega regions. You look at like New Orleans, Greater New Orleans Zinc, and even the Lafayette and the Acadiana. What are the relationships between Assumption, Lafourche, Terrebonne, St. Mary? How are you working together to really help build sort of a better collective region for all of us?
Yeah, look, I think we have probably one of the greatest groups we've ever had, right? And there have been some great leaders in all the communities, right? But I think the impetus around regionalism is finally hitting us all. And I give a lot of credit to Christy over at SLEC for kind of putting us all in the same room finally and making us see the light and see where she's headed and where she wants to go. Jason's doing some great things here in Terrebonne. When Gordy was here, we did a lot of partnerships with Gordy from a coastal restoration perspective and looking at, how do we continue to build off of each other, right? Mr. Leroy and Big Daddy up in Assumption now, Mr. Sam, who just took over in St. Mary, David Hanegrove, who's a former parish president of St. Mary, is a huge part of our group as well, always showed up. Jason likes to joke that Lafourche and we're spooning, right? I always point out that Lafourche is the big spoon in this relationship. As goes each other, is we all go, right? People come from Assumption to come shop in Thibodaux, right? Much as I hate to admit it, sometimes I shop in Terrebonne.
Right.
Right. Like to make a Sam's run every now and then.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. We'll eat at restaurants. So there's going to be a lot of bleed over. A lot of ties to the oil and gas industry and our service industries, right? The pipeline surveyors or engineers or those service companies have a break between the Port of Terrebonne and and Fouchon. So I think we're finally all getting to the point where we're seeing that light and how together we can be better than if we just thought about Lafourche or we just thought about Terrebonne and we just thought about Assumption. And we're finding that collectively as a group, we can make some pretty cool things happen.
I'm really glad to hear that. I think when you think about the regions and just the direction, obviously, as we've become a more global society to begin with, but this idea that we need to fight each other parish to parish, I think is not only outdated, but just not doing a really great service to our community. I think when we work together, you're right, we're stronger together. And there are forces, outside of the state who want to, recruit business and industry and are vying for people to live there in their communities. And so I love the idea that we're working collectively to really enhance what we're doing, and that we are stronger together and we can create a better community for everybody by working together.
Yeah, I'm glad that we finally figured that out.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So you mentioned some sort of window of time that maybe you have left as parish president. What was that, 2 years?
2 years and 46 weeks. I hadn't gotten down to the days and minutes and hours yet. But
I was about to be real concerned.
Yeah, no.
What are you hoping to accomplish in these last 2 years?
Somebody once asked me if the first term or the second term was harder, from what they called the legacy perspective, right? And I think it was the first term, because you're worried about getting things done, building on the stuff that you talked about when you campaigned, and then you're always worried about re-election, right? This time it's the pressure's off, right? We did a lot of cool stuff the first 4 years through the pandemic and the hurricanes. Now I just want to see the place finish being rebuilt, right? I want to see all the little projects that we started get finished, right? Get the buildings back up, get the judges back in their courtrooms, get our public works employees back in the field offices the way they were pre-Hurricane Ida. Get all most of our recreational facilities are done, right? So get the kids back on the ball fields and get them back to their baseball tournaments and their basketball tournaments and their soccer tournaments. It's those little things that I want to wrap up. The bigger stuff, long game, right? We can put stuff in place that'll hopefully make an impact over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. And I think for the most part, we've done a lot of that or started that. But it's finishing those partnerships, finishing the Thibodeau expansion, right? And getting people back to work, finishing the clinic for Lady of the Sea, seeing our hospital open back up. I want to see the community finish being rebuilt.
When I think about your time, I want to take a moment. I know I've said this to you, but I think it needs to be said publicly. You need to be recognized and acknowledged for your leadership during some really, really difficult times. And we've had hurricanes. We've never, I don't know that I can't say never. I haven't lived down here my whole life, but certainly Ida was one of the more significant and severe storms in this region's history. But beyond that, the pandemic, that was no leader had ever been through that, right?
Yeah, absolutely no idea
there
what
was
we were doing.
Zero guidebook. I have a little hurricane manual here that I can pull out every once in a while and say, okay, what do I do next? But I think, your leadership and your steadfastness needs to be recognized and acknowledged. And I want to say thank you for that. As somebody who lives in this community, it means a lot to those of us who are here and are committed to seeing their community be better.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm one of 326 parish employees, and it takes that village.
Yeah.
Right? It's not all me, believe me.
Were you surprised at we've had some conversations with folks who are in leadership roles about how long it took. Like, did you think when you first got in as parish president, you were going to have like 10 things, you were going to check them all off on your first year? Were you surprised at how long it takes to get things done sometimes?
No. I mean, I'd been there before.
Yeah, that's
right?
true. You've had it a little bit.
I worked for Miss Randolph for 5 or 6 years, and spent 3 years as the parish administrator, right? Mm-hmm. So, when we first walked back in the office, for me, it was like going home, right? A lot of the people were still there that I had worked with. I'd taken that kind of 4 years and went to work for Mayor Ashley in the city of Thibodeau as the public works director, and decided to run. So it was easy, right? I knew where the phone was, I knew what the extension numbers were, and I knew exactly how long it took, right? Now, did we plan on everything that had happened? No. Yeah. And I joked when we signed the emergency declaration for the snow event. It was emergency declaration, I think, number 22 in 6 years.
Oof.
Or 5 years.
Yeah. Snow was not on the bingo card,
Snow was
right?
not on the bingo card either. And look, I laughed. It was over the weekend. There was a meteorologist that there was that kind of earthquake or tsunami thing down in the Caribbean, and they issued like a tsunami warning. And I was like, look, if any wave from that touches Fourchon, I'm claiming it, and I'm blacking out my bingo card, because that's really all I have is a tsunami or a volcano. I mean, that's really all I have left. But look, I knew exactly what we were walking into from a policy, from a procedural perspective. The challenges were a little bit different, but again, we have, I would put our team up against probably any. Right, I think if we walked into the White House, we could probably run the country if we really wanted to, just from the group that we have.
Is that what next?
No, I wouldn't go that far. But we have a really awesome team. So I appreciate the kind words, and people say that all the time. And my response is always, it's a team effort.
Yeah, takes a leader though. It does. That's where you say thank you.
Thank you.
What's your proudest accomplishment? What do you when you look back on your time? And I know you have 2 years left, so there's still a lot
time left,
and I'll bring you back at the end, and we'll redo this question. But what so far? What's the thing that you are like? Yeah, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, the hardest, and it's also the hardest thing was the whole tax reform thing we pulled off at the end of 2023. Right, when you look at just the political setup of Lafourche, and how we morphed from the police jury back in the 80s to a charter form of government with a parish president, 9 councilmen. We went from 14 to 9 at one point, or 15 to 9 at one point. But there's still a lot of holdovers from those police jury days, right? And a lot of what I call the little kingdoms, right? And these little districts that kind of just kept going from year to year and continued to collect money and do little pet projects for people. So when we came in and we knew it was something that we talked about it during the campaign. We knew it was something we wanted to tackle. I didn't think it was going to be as difficult as it was. We know this from what happened on the state level, right? Tax policy is inherently complicated for me and you, much less as you trickle that down to, the person who doesn't pay enough attention to probably their tax bill as some people do. And then when you throw in the political dynamic of that, you start to make people scared of certain things, and that, roads are never going to get paved again, or, all this other fun stuff. But, again, it goes back to partnerships, right? The partnerships that we had with the council, the partnerships that we had with, the school system, because Superintendent Martin was a huge part of that, because some of the tax dollars we rolled off, the school board picked up, and we did teacher pay raises with it to help recruit and retain our education system. Because, again, without that, we don't have a community anymore, right? Starting from K through 12 all the way to what you guys are doing here. So pulling that off and not only having it pass, right, but having it pass by a pretty substantial, 70-30 margin, 60-40 margin in most cases, was pretty huge. And it was something that a lot of people, and I'm just maybe glad a lot of those people that told me that didn't go vote, or maybe voted, I changed their mind, I don't know. But a lot of people told me we couldn't do it because of the political system, and we were never going to take away those little kingdoms, and we were never going to be able to lower the tax rate for people. Well, we did it. So that's probably going to go down as my number one.
All right. Well, congratulations on that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our other higher ed partners, Nicholls State University, such an important part, not just for Lafourche, but for our entire region. And I think, again, the regional universities are so important to our communities, providing that education right there in the community. But certainly, I came up in Ohio with a regional university, and it really was the heart and soul of the town and we call them counties, right? Of the county where it resided in. And I see that same thing in Nicholls. It's that generational alum base. It's an economic driver. It's an opportunity for students to get educated in the region. And, they have such an important role to play in the parish. Just any thoughts that you want to share on Nicholls and where they're at, and just, how you see their role in what you do.
Yeah, look, as a kid who went there and graduated from there, I didn't pay much attention to it when I was there, right? It was more about, chasing cows and drinking beer at the farm than it was, going to class. But I somehow made it out. But then you kind of grow older, right? Yeah. And you see that generational connection. My dad went to Nicholls when Nicholls still had an ROTC program, and that's how he wound up in the Army. My mom decided to go back to school when I was late in high school, early into college. She had never gone to college. And she said I wanted something that she wanted to do, right? So she took night classes and got her associates in business from Nicholls. And lo and behold, we actually took a class together.
Really?
Yeah, it was probably not the best. Yeah,
I was gonna say it was cool, but maybe it wasn't cool.
On those nights where you didn't really want to go to class, you kind of had to because your mom sat next to you.
You could tag team.
You couldn't
be like, Mom, you go tonight, I'll go tomorrow.
No. She was much too deadline for that. But
I'm giving away how I got through algebra class with my college roommate. So
whoops. No, she was great study partner though. When you had a question, she was still is way smarter than I am. But then you kind of grow up and you see that connection to the community. You see the economic impact from things like the Manning Academy, who show up once a year, and the people that they bring into town every year. But just from a giving kids who, can't get to Baton Rouge or can't get to Lafayette or can't get to Ruston or New Orleans, the ability to get in a car like I did every morning and drive 25 minutes to campus, get a great education, and then go work a part-time job somewhere and get themselves through college is huge. And I think as we continue to figure out, how do we continue to grow as a parish, they're going to continue to play a role in that. And you look, as they continue to win, athletic championships in basketball and football, that's a great driver for kids to come here from outside of our normal community as they recruit. I think as they continue to pump out top quality nurses and teachers and pre-med students and biologists, that's a draw for people to come here as well. So it's not only what they're doing inside the community, but it's what they're doing to get people from outside the community to come here. That's a great shining star for us.
Great. Okay. Now I have another question. So you chase cows?
Yeah, I did. I was.
Is that the same as cow tipping? Because
No,
we did
it is
cow
not.
tipping in Ohio.
It is not.
No, it's different.
It is
Okay.
different. Normally involved a couple of cases of natural light back in because it was the only thing we could afford back then. But no, I worked.
They run from you, or
They
they
do.
just look
No,
at you?
No, they run sometimes. Sometimes they chase you. It all depends
Okay.
on how messed up we were. But I worked part-time at the farm when I was in college as well, with Mr. Randy. Yeah, I did.
Neat.
Yeah, I did a whole bunch of weird stuff when I was in college to earn money. But
Okay, so I mean, we went from what was it, cardiopulmonology,
ag, yeah,
right,
ag.
to working on the farm with ag,
Yeah.
and now politics.
yeah, and then I also did a stint as a pharmacy technician for CVS. I'm a nationally certified pharmacy
Really?
technician. Yeah.
Okay,
I was
I
a
would
drug
ask
dealer
you
for a
what
while.
your favorite has been, but that's a question for after as well, right?
Yeah.
Holy cow, you have quite a varied background.
I do.
Very cool.
I do.
All right, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to look into the future, knowing that you have some time left on the clock, but that with somebody will be coming in after you. What advice do you have for the next parish president?
Yowza. Be patient and communicate.
Okay.
Right. If you look at the storied political history of Lafourche, you will notice that we didn't always communicate very well, and we weren't always very patient. We ended up on the front pages of the paper a lot of times. There was a series of 4 years where nothing got accomplished. Right. There was what we like to refer to as the 5-4 days. Right, where a block of 5 councilmen thought they controlled everything and blocked then Parish President Breaux from just about everything. Ms. Randolph did a little bit better of a job at it, but she had her challenges as well. But we found this neat tool called communication, right? That when you talk to people, you share those ideas, you share what your thought processes are and where you're headed, whether it be who you're going to award the engineering contract to or who you're going to go buy the new DPW truck from, or how we're going to continue to fight things like flood insurance and homeowners insurance and rebuild our community and economic development. You get that buy-in, it works a whole lot easier for you. We're still going to have our disagreements, and we do, right?
Sure.
Those 9 personalities that sit up there with me every 2 weeks are varied.
Yeah.
And they come from very diverse backgrounds. But when you talk through it and you can have that line of communication open and you have the patience level, right? I've never prayed for it because they say the more you pray for patience, the more God tests you. So I don't ever pray for patience.
I hadn't heard that before, but
Yeah,
that's good to know.
Sometimes he gives it to me, sometimes he doesn't, just naturally. But if you have the patience and you have the communication skills, you can continue to grow this place into a great community.
Yeah. You know, I've often heard that people want to be heard, right? And so even if sometimes the decision doesn't go the way they had hoped or maybe the way they really wanted, if they felt like they had a voice and they felt like somebody was listening to them and at least heard their side of things or their point of view, that it might be a little bit easier. And I think that just goes to that point of good communication.
Yeah, and look, we are constantly somewhere in the community, right? I did I guess another little known tidbit. My side hustle is auctioneering, right? So I did an auction Saturday night.
You're very good at it.
for a community event, right? And you just walk around that room and you run the gambit of, I in the middle of the auction, I sold something. And a guy's like, yeah, now come clean out my ditch. And I was like, all right, I'm going to come find you in 5 minutes, right? So you go sit down next to the guy and you're like, all right, you really need me to clean out your ditch? He's like, well, I was just kind of picking. I was like, no, what's the problem? So we had a 20-minute conversation about drainage down East 44th Street, right? And I'm sitting there typing an email to the barn supervisor. So when he got to work this morning, he saw the email, said, hey, can you go check this out? So probably next week, the guy's ditch is going to get dug. But it's the little things that make not only the councilman, but the community feel a lot better if you're out there and you're responsive.
Well, and it seems like that would be for you the opportunity to get some of those wins. You know what I mean? To see your work. So sometimes I think when you are in leadership, the projects or the things that you're working on, sometimes they take a long time to come to fruition, right? They may take years to actually see something get across the finish line. And so having the opportunity to engage with people and be able to solve their issues or their challenges in an immediate way, not only is it great for that community member, but I have to think that it's rewarding for the employees of the parish to be able to say, I helped somebody today.
In government, ditch digging and grass cutting is the only two things that offer you instant gratification, right? Because you can see it happening. Other than that, it's really slow and mundane sometimes.
All right, well, we're going to wrap things up. I always like to do a little homework on my guests, and so I have a few things. So I hear that you go by a few different names. You mentioned one of them a little earlier, which was Trey.
Trey,
And where did that come from?
So I'm the third.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So in Cajun culture, de trois, right? Trey is French for three.
Yes.
So I'm not going to give you my dad's nickname on air. But as the third Archie, I became Trey.
Okay.
So to this, I mean, all of my family, if you come to Christmas, right, you're gonna hear Trey. Nobody calls me Archie. If you were looking for Archie, you were looking for my dad or my grandpa.
Okay. Well, I will say I have a little nickname myself, and I didn't get it when I was younger. It has nothing to do with family. But when I was in college, one of my very first jobs that I worked, there were 4 Kristines, and my maiden name is Hatfield, and so everybody took to calling me Hattie.
There we go.
And if you go back to Ohio, you will be hard-pressed to find anyone who has any clue who Kristine Hatfield was at the time. They're all like, Hattie? In fact, when I came down for my first job in New Orleans, they called to do a reference check, and the person who they called was like, I don't know who you're talking about. And I was like, no!
That's awesome.
So I get the nickname that sticks.
Right.
Right? All right. There's, I hear Duke. You were a Duke?
I was.
Okay. What was that about?
So that was the crew of Versailles, right, down in South Lafourche. I got a call one day from Miss Jure Jean Bonjaro, right, who called and said, hey, look, they asked me to be a maid. This is not Jordan's thing, right? The only person I could think that would want to walk in a spotlight with me would be you. Would you do it? Yeah, sure. Whatever. Let's Mardi Gras. Let's go do it, right? And then about a month later, she called me back and she said, look, your name's still on the list, but they're going to find you a new maid because I'm having a baby the same day as she was due the same week as the ball was. So I ended up with another lady, but it was a great weekend.
Have you been king of any of the cruise?
I have not.
Would you do it?
I don't know.
Yeah?
We'll see.
Maybe?
I just ride in my car or now on my motorcycle and just wave at people.
Okay. And I hear that you have some fancy clothes that you like to put on. Somebody told me about some dress coveralls?
I do. So
have you figured out who I talked to
yet?
I
do, and I'm going to call her when we leave here. But no, so the coverall is an Archie rite of passage, right? Both my dad and my grandfather were both oil field guys. My grandfather worked for Texaco for 40 plus years, mostly down in Montague and Little Caya, right here in Terrebonne, because that's where he was from. And then my dad, when he got out of the service, worked for the old Dual Drilling Corporation. So he worked offshore for, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years after he got out of the military, when I was probably like really, really, really young, through kindergarten. And my dad and my grandfather, the day he passed away, had a coverall on. And my dad to this day wears a coverall every day. That's just what they wore. And on Sundays, my dad has never done it, but on Sundays when my grandma and grandpa would go to church, he'd have the dress coveralls with the little shiny belts and the little buckle in the front. So every now and then, I'll send it to Misty. She can figure out how to put it in the podcast. One year for Halloween, I dressed up as Big Archie, and had, look, one day when I hit puberty, I might be able to grow facial hair, but I can't do it yet. So I had a little, fake mustache, a pair of glasses, silvered up my hair, and put on a coverall. So it's a rite of passage for us. But yeah, I don't wear them very often, if at all. Maybe a couple times a year if I'm like really doing something outside. Mm-hmm. But my dad to this day, all the pictures of him and my kids growing up when they were born, he's in the hospital in his coverall.
Oh, what a nice tribute.
Yeah.
So have I seen pictures of you on a motorcycle?
You have.
Are you a commissioned officer?
I am.
Like, what's the deal there?
I am. So I had the ability in 2012, went through the Sheriff's Office Academy.
Okay.
When I was working for Miss Randolph, just because I was interested in it. We were doing Through our OEP department, those guys were both commissioned officers. And it just kind of, again, something that was a challenge, right? You got to keep growing in life. So I went through the academy, became a reservist. When I got elected, I kind of walked away from it for a little bit because we're just too busy with everything going on. But lo and behold, every 2 weeks when we have our council meeting, there's always a sheriff's office guy there for security for the meeting in case something gets out of hand. And most of the time, the guys who work it are the motor officers that pick up a detail to work the meetings. And I always joked with them. I was like, man, one day you got to teach me how to ride the bike, right? Because I'd always be behind them in a parade or something, right, in my car, waving at people as a politician. So one day they called me and they said, look, we're having a class. Talk to the sheriff. If he says you can take the class, we'll hold a spot for you. So I called Craig, right? And I've known the sheriff since I was a kid. When he first got elected, he had a junior deputy. He called it the Explorer program back in the day. And I was one of those little explorers, little junior deputies growing up. So he literally watched me grow up. So I called him and I said, hey, Sheriff, can I go take the course? And two, if I can pass it, can I have my badge and gun back? And he said, yeah, absolutely. Have fun. So it's a 2-week course. And we did it in, I think it was like May. So it was like blaring hot in St. Charles Parish on a big concrete surface. And they teach you how to not just ride. Everybody kind of can ride a bike, right? But it's all these weird cone patterns and actually learn how to operate the bike through traffic, doing escorts. And it's an 80-hour course. And the first probably 3 or 4 days, I spent more time on the ground than I did on the bike. You drop it, it happens. And look, I got to give credit, and I'll say it, Deputy Harry Guillot, Sergeant Eddie Munoz, and Deputy Giovanni Tarullo from St. Charles Parish. Those guys really stuck with it. And they were like, the first couple of days, I was like, all right, you just go back to being a politician.
Bad.
There's no way you're going to do this. But they stuck with it, and look, at some point it's going to click. And when it clicked, it clicked. So I do, parades and escorts and weird stuff with them. So yeah, it freaks people out. It does.
Yeah.
We did a Christmas parade, and we were doing kind of circles in the street, and this one lady kind of jumps out and stops. She goes, Archie? And I went, no, that's my twin brother.
No.
And her husband's cracking up laughing behind him. And she goes, hey, you have a name tag on. And I went, man, right? But yeah, it's fun. I get a kick out of riding with him, and just, kind of a side hustle.
Good time. Okay, so let's recap. You can help intubate. You can prescribe me medicine, or you can at least fill your prescription. Fill my prescription. You can pass laws and enforce laws. Is there anything else that we need to know? You are like a jack of all trades.
Yeah, I have I use this joke a lot when I'm trying to be like Michel Claudet. So when Michel was the parish president, when he left office, they kind of did that kind of roast for him at the end. And his last line was, somebody asked me what I was going to do after I got out of office. And he's like, well, I'm a CPA, I own a bank, I have a real estate license, and I have a pest control license, right? So I was like, all right. So I could do your drugs. I could, but so I've racked up a few little but it's all about, for me, it's all about personal growth, right? Yeah. And kind of continuing to challenge yourself and learning new trades, learning a new skill. Because I don't know what I'm doing in 2 years and 44 weeks, right? Yeah. I might just go be a motorcycle cop the rest of my life. You never know.
There you go. Well, it seems to me like you might have a bright future ahead of you, young man. I think you're going to do just fine.
Let's hope so.
I think so. All right. Well, let's bring it home. I always like to ask if you have a word of advice for those who are watching out there or listening in, something that you'd like to share with them.
Look, I always end, and I know you've seen them when we do these little videos for whatever the thread is that's coming, right? I always end it with hug your kids and say a prayer, right? Love Jesus and be kind to each other, and we'll have a happy community.
Great advice to end on. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Awesome. I had a great time getting to know you a little bit better. And for those of you who are watching or listening, this is Bridging the Bayou, the podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to check out all the links in the show notes.